The private jet touched down just after sunset, its tires kissing the tarmac with a soft hiss. Inside, a man in a rumpled navy suit rubbed his temples, exhaustion weighing heavier than his briefcase. He'd been gone 3 weeks this time, longer than promised, and the merger was finally sealed. Billions secured, another win. But as the car pulled through the iron gates of his estate, something felt off. The house was dark except for a single light in the kitchen, and then he heard it. A scream, not a startled yelp or a playful shriek. This was raw, terrified. It cut through the quiet night like glass. His heart slammed against his ribs. He threw open the car door before it fully stopped, sprinting up the marble steps 2 at a time. The front door was unlocked. He never locked it when she was home alone, just in case. He burst inside, already bracing for broken glass, an intruder, maybe worse. But the kitchen was empty of danger. There, on the tiled floor, sat his daughter. 12 years old, knees pulled to her chest, face buried in her arms. Her whole body shook with sobs so deep they sounded like they were tearing her apart from the inside. Papers were scattered around her like fallen leaves. One was crumpled tightly in her fist. He dropped to his knees beside her, breath ragged. Hey, baby. What happened? Are you hurt? She didn't look up. Just shook her head violently, her braids swaying. Another choked cry escaped her. He reached out slowly, gently prying the paper from her fingers. It was a school worksheet. At the top, in bold letters, "My family tree, discover your roots." Beneath it, neat boxes waited to be filled. Mother's name, father's name, country of origin, ethnic background, family traditions. Every single line was blank except one. In shaky handwriting, she'd written, "Unknown." And below that, in smaller letters as if she hoped no one would see, "I don't belong anywhere." He stared at it, stunned. This wasn't fear. This was grief. A quiet, aching kind of pain he hadn't seen coming. He'd given her everything. Designer clothes, the best tutors, a room bigger than most apartments. He'd thought that was enough. Love in his mind was security, safety, opportunity. But looking at her now, curled into herself like she was trying to disappear, he realized he'd missed something huge. She finally lifted her head. Her eyes were red, swollen but sharp with a question he couldn't answer. "Why don't I know where I'm from?" she whispered. "Everyone else in class. They brought photos, stories, grandma's recipes. Even Jake, he's adopted too. But he knows his birth mom lives in Oregon and sends him birthday cards. I don't even know what my mom looked like." He opened his mouth, ready to say the things he always said. "You're a part of this family. You've got me. Blood doesn't matter." But the words died in his throat. Because right then he saw it clearly. Those words weren't comfort. They were erasure. To her, not knowing wasn't just a missing fact. It was a hole in her identity. A silence where her history should be. He pulled her close and she didn't resist, but she didn't melt into him either. She stayed stiff like she was holding her breath. He could feel the dampness of her tears through his shirt. "I'm sorry," he said. And for the first time in years, he meant it in a way that had nothing to do with business or timing. "I didn't realize how much this hurt you." She sniffled, wiping her nose with the back of her hand. "Mrs. Daniels said it's okay if we don't know everything. But when I said I didn't know anything," Tyler laughed, said I was like a ghost, that I popped out of nowhere. Her voice cracked. "Maybe I did." "No," he said firmly, cupping her face. "You didn't. You came from someone who loved you enough to give you a chance. Even if we don't know her name yet. But what if we never do?" she asked, her voice small again. "What if I'm just blank forever?" He didn't have an answer. So he did the only thing he could. He held her tighter, let her cry, let the silence fill with the sound of her breathing slowly calming. Outside, the night deepened. The mansion, usually so full of expensive quiet, finally felt alive, not with luxury, but with something real. Later, after he'd made her warm milk and tucked her into bed, she'd fallen asleep almost instantly. Exhausted from the storm inside her, he went back to the kitchen. He picked up the worksheet again. Stared at that word, unknown. It shouldn't be unknown. Not if he had anything to do about it. He walked to his home office, the room where billion-dollar deals were made with a few keystrokes. But tonight he wasn't thinking about markets or margins. He sat at his desk, opened his laptop and typed slowly, "How to find birth parents in closed adoption, African American." The search results flooded the screen. Forums, support groups, private investigators who specialized in reuniting families. He clicked on one profile, a woman with kind eyes in her photo, decades of experience. Testimonials from adoptees who finally found pieces of themselves. He read about DNA testing, sealed records, the importance of cultural connection. He learned that for Black adoptees, especially those adopted transracially, the search wasn't just personal. It was tied to a history of displacement. Lost records, systemic gaps. He leaned back, running a hand over his face. He'd spent his life solving puzzles, coding algorithms, untangling corporate mergers, predicting market shifts. But this was different. This wasn't about logic. It was about heart. About giving his daughter back a part of herself he never knew was missing. He picked up his phone, dialed a number from the investigator's website. It was nearly midnight, but he didn't care. When a calm professional voice answered, he didn't lead with his name or net worth. He just said, "Hi, I need help finding my daughter's birth family. She's 12, African American. We don't have much to go on." He listened as the woman asked gentle questions. Adoption agency, state, any paperwork. He answered as best he could, his voice low so it wouldn't carry down the hall to his daughter's room. When he hung up, he sat in the dark for a long time. For years, he'd believed love was enough, that providing was protecting. But tonight he understood. Love also means listening, even when the truth is painful, even when it means admitting you got it wrong. Upstairs, his daughter slept, still clutching the stuffed rabbit he'd given her the day he brought her home. Back then, he'd thought the hardest part was over, rescuing her from the system, giving her a better life. Now he saw the real work was just beginning, not building her a future, but helping her reclaim her past. And for the first time since he'd become a father, he didn't feel like a billionaire. He just felt like a dad, scared, determined, and finally awake. The next morning, sunlight streamed through the tall windows. But the house felt different, quieter, heavier. He made pancakes, something he hadn't done in years, and set the table with real plates, not the fancy china kept for guests. When his daughter came downstairs, her eyes were still puffy, but she didn't look away. She sat wrapped in an oversized hoodie and picked at the syrup with her fork. "You okay?" he asked, keeping his voice light. She shrugged. "Guess so." He wanted to say more, to promise he'd fix everything, but he held back. Promises felt cheap now. Instead, he poured her orange juice and sat across from her. They ate in silence, but it wasn't the cold silence of before. It was the kind that comes after a storm, when the air finally clears. Later, he called the school. Not to complain, but to ask gently if they could offer support for students struggling with identity projects. The counselor sounded surprised but grateful. "We try," she said, "but sometimes kids fall through the cracks." He thanked her and hung up, feeling a quiet anger, not at the school, but at himself for never asking how she really felt in that world. That afternoon, while she was in her room sketching, she'd started drawing faces lately, women with strong cheekbones, wide smiles, braided hair. He went through the adoption file again. It was thinner than he remembered. A few pages, medical records mostly blank. One line, birth mother, age 19, African American. No known relatives involved. That was it. No photo, no name, no story. He stared at those words like they were a riddle he couldn't solve. 19. Just a kid herself. What must she have gone through? Did she cry when she signed the papers? Did she hope someone like him would love her baby well? Or did she feel she had no choice? He closed the folder and walked to his daughter's room. The door was open a crack. She was humming softly, pencil moving across the page. He knocked gently. "Hey," he said. "Can I come in?" She nodded, not looking up. He sat on the edge of her bed. "I've been thinking, maybe we can look into your birth family. Together, if you want." Her pencil stopped. She finally looked at him, eyes wide. "Really?" "Yeah, I called someone last night, a professional who helps with this kind of thing." She's starting to look into it. A flicker of hope crossed her face, then doubt. What if they don't want to meet me? "Then we'll cross that bridge when we get there," he said. "But you deserve to know your story, even the hard parts." She nodded slowly, then turned back to her drawing. But this time her shoulders weren't hunched. She sat a little taller. Over the next few days, life went on, but with a new undercurrent. He made dinner more often, asked about her art, listened when she talked about her friends, really listened, not just nodded while checking his phone. One night, she showed him a sketch of a woman standing under a street lamp, holding a baby. "I imagine her like this," she said quietly. Strong, sad but loving, he didn't say anything, just hugged her. And for the first time, she hugged back without pulling away. Then, midweek, the investigator called. Her voice was calm but serious. "I found something," she said. "It's not much, but it's a start." He stepped outside onto the patio so his daughter wouldn't overhear. The woman explained that the adoption agency had gone through several mergers, but old records showed the birth mother had been enrolled in college, Wayne State University in Detroit. She'd been working nights at a hospital to pay tuition, and then she disappeared from records 2 months before the baby was born. "Disappeared?" he asked, stomach tightening. "There's a police report," the investigator said gently. "Hit and run." She was walking home from her shift. The driver was never found. He felt like the ground had dropped out from under him. He gripped the railing, knuckles white. She died? Yes, just weeks before the adoption was finalized. He didn't speak for a long moment. All this time, he'd imagined a young woman who chose adoption and moved on. But she hadn't moved on. She'd been taken, and his daughter had lost her before she even knew her. Was there family? He managed to ask. Yes, a mother. Still lives in Detroit. Retired nurse. Her name is Evelyn. He wrote it down, the pen shaking in his hand. Evelyn, a grandmother, alive, real. Did she try to get custody? He asked, dreading the answer. She did, the investigator said. But the system moved slowly. By the time her paperwork was reviewed, the adoption was already in process. And, well, she didn't have the resources to fight it. He closed his eyes. So his daughter hadn't just lost her mother. She'd lost a whole family who wanted her. And he'd never known. That night, he couldn't sleep. He sat in the dark living room, replaying every moment he'd dismissed her questions about her roots. Every time he'd said, "You've got everything you need right here," as if love could erase history. But history wasn't something you erased. It was something you carried. And she'd been carrying an empty box. The next morning, he found her in the kitchen again, this time making toast. She looked up when he entered. "You look tired." "I didn't sleep much," he admitted. He took a breath. "I learned something about your mom." Her whole body went still. "What?" He sat at the table, motioning for her to join him. Her name was Keisha. She was studying to be a doctor. She worked nights at a hospital, and she loved you very much. Tears filled her eyes instantly. "How do you know?" "Because she kept you safe until the very end. Even when things were hard." He didn't tell her about the accident yet. Not all at once. But he showed her a photo the investigator had found. A grainy yearbook picture from Wayne State. A young woman with bright eyes. A confident smile, wearing a hoodie just like the one his daughter loved. "That's her?" His daughter whispered, tracing the image with her finger. "That's her," he said softly. She stared at it for a long time. Then quietly, "She looks like me." He nodded. "Yeah, she does." Later that day, while she was upstairs listening to music, he called the investigator again. "Is there any way to reach Evelyn, gently, without overwhelming her?" "I can make contact," the woman said. "But you should be ready. She might have mixed feelings. You're a stranger who raised her granddaughter." "That's complicated, I know," he said. "But my daughter deserves to know she's not alone." He hung up and walked to the window. Outside, his daughter was sitting under the big oak tree, sketchbook open, drawing Keisha again. But this time, she'd added a small child in her arms. She was giving her mother back to herself, one line at a time. He watched her, heart full and aching. He couldn't undo the past. He couldn't bring Keisha back. But maybe, just maybe, he could help stitch together the pieces that remained. Not as a billionaire. Not as a savior. Just as a father who finally understood that love isn't just about giving everything you have. Sometimes it's about helping someone find what was lost. A week passed, and the house settled into a new kind of rhythm. His daughter carried the photo of Keisha everywhere, in her backpack tucked into her sketchbook, even propped up on her nightstand like a guardian. She started asking questions. What kind of music did she like? Did she cook? Was she funny? He didn't know most of the answers. But instead of brushing her off, he'd say, "Let's find out together." They watched old Motown videos online, tried making cornbread from a Detroit food blog, and even looked up Wayne State's campus tours on YouTube. It wasn't much, but it was something real. Then one rainy Tuesday afternoon, the investigator called again. Her voice was softer this time, almost reverent. "I spoke with Evelyn," she said. "She cried when I told her about your daughter. She's been praying for this for years." He sat down hard on the edge of his desk. "She wants to meet?" "She does, but she's nervous. She lost her daughter, then her granddaughter all in 1 year. She spent the last decade wondering if you'd ever reach out. And now that you have, she's scared it'll hurt more if it doesn't work out." "I understand," he said. "We don't want to rush her or overwhelm her. She asked one thing," the investigator continued. "She wants to see a photo of your daughter. Just one, to know she's okay." He walked upstairs and found his daughter sketching by the window, rain tapping gently on the glass. He didn't tell her everything, just that Keisha's mother, her grandmother, knew about her now, and that she'd like to see her. His daughter's hands stilled. "She's real?" "Very real," he said. "And she's been thinking about you your whole life." Tears welled up, but this time they weren't sad. They were full of something else. Wonder, maybe, or hope too big to hold. She went to her closet and pulled out a recent school photo, the one where she was smiling with her art award in hand. She held it for a long moment, then handed it to him. "Tell her, I draw like Keisha used to write poetry. That's what I imagine." He nodded, throat tight. He scanned the photo and sent it that night. 2 days later, a package arrived. Not by courier, not fancy, just a plain brown envelope with Detroit postmarked on it. His daughter saw it on the kitchen counter and froze. "Is that from her?" "I think so," he said. She didn't open it right away. She held it like it might vanish if she moved too fast. Finally, at the table, with him sitting close but not too close, she carefully tore the seal. Inside was a small photo album. On the first page, a young woman, Keisha, laughing in a hospital scrubs, holding a stethoscope like it was a trophy. On the next, her standing in front of Wayne State's library, books stacked high in her arms. Then a Polaroid of her as a little girl, pigtails and gap-toothed grin. And on the last page, a faded ultrasound image with Amara written in delicate cursive beneath it. His daughter gasped. "She named me?" He hadn't known that. His chest ached. Tucked in the back was a handwritten note on lined paper, the ink slightly smudged. "Dear Amara, I've waited so long to say your name out loud. You were loved before you took your first breath. Your mama wrote your name on that paper the day she found out she was having you. She said it meant grace and strength. She wanted you to have both. I don't know if we'll ever meet, but I see you, and I'm so proud of the young woman you're becoming. With all my love, Grandma." His daughter read it twice, then pressed it to her chest like a shield. She didn't cry. She just sat there, breathing slowly, as if something inside her had finally clicked into place. That evening, she asked, "Can we go to Detroit?" He didn't hesitate. "Yes, whenever you're ready." They planned the trip for the weekend, not as a grand gesture, but as a quiet pilgrimage. He booked a simple hotel near Evelyn's neighborhood, not the fancy downtown suites he usually stayed in. He wanted this to feel human, not like a performance. He even called ahead to a local soul food spot Evelyn had mentioned in her note. She said her daughter loved Miss Lula's peach cobbler, he told his daughter, who smiled like she'd just been handed a secret. The night before they left, he found her packing a small gift, a drawing she'd made of the three of them, Keisha in the center, him on one side, Evelyn on the other, all holding hands under a Detroit skyline. "Just in case," she said shyly. At the airport the next morning, she was quiet but calm. No nervous fidgeting, no last-minute doubts. She held the photo album in her lap the whole flight, tracing the edges like a map. When they landed, the air smelled different, damp, earthy, alive with the hum of a city that had raised Keisha. He rented a car and drove slowly through the streets, pointing out Wayne State's campus, the hospital where she'd worked. His daughter rolled down the window, letting the wind brush her face as if trying to catch a whisper from the past. Evelyn lived in a modest brick house with a well-kept garden and a porch swing. Yellow mums lined the walkway. As they pulled up, an older woman stood in the doorway, hands clasped tight, wearing a floral dress and white nurse's shoes, like she'd dressed for something sacred. His daughter didn't run. She walked slowly, deliberately up the path. Evelyn didn't move either. They just looked at each other from a few feet apart. Two strangers bound by blood and loss and love that never got to speak. Then Evelyn whispered, "You've got her eyes." His daughter nodded, tears finally spilling over. "I brought you something." She handed her the drawing. Evelyn took it with trembling hands, then looked up. Really looked. At her granddaughter's face, her hair, the way she held her shoulders.
"You're so beautiful," she said, voice breaking.
Just like her. And then she opened her arms. His daughter stepped into them without hesitation. They held each other for a long time, right there on the porch, while he stood back. Watching the reunion he never knew his daughter needed so badly. He saw Evelyn stroke her hair, whisper words he couldn't hear, kiss the top of her head like she'd dreamed of doing for 12 years. Later, over sweet tea and peach cobbler at the kitchen table, stories flowed like water finally unblocked. Evelyn talked about Keisha's laugh, how she'd dance in the kitchen while making pancakes, how she'd stay up all night studying but still make time to call her mom every Sunday. His daughter listened, eyes wide, soaking in every detail like it was oxygen. At one point, Evelyn reached into a drawer and pulled out a small notebook. "She wrote poems in here," she said. "Mostly about hope. About you." She opened it to a page near the end. "In neat handwriting, 'My little star, you'll shine even when I'm not there to see it. But I'll be in the wind, in the music, in every brave choice you make.'" Mama, his daughter, read it aloud, voice steady. Then she looked at Evelyn and said, "I want to know everything." And Evelyn smiled through her tears. "Then I'll tell you." Every last word. He sat quietly, sipping his tea, watching them connect across time and grief. In that moment, he didn't feel like the man who owned companies or jets. He just felt grateful. To be there, to witness this healing, to finally understand that family isn't built on perfection, but on showing up, even late, with an open heart. The drive back home felt different. Not lighter exactly, but fuller. Like the car carried more than just two people now. His daughter sat by the window, the small notebook from Evelyn resting in her lap, fingers tracing the edges like it was sacred. She hadn't said much since they left Detroit, but her silence wasn't sad anymore. It was thoughtful. Peaceful even. He glanced at her in the rearview mirror. "You okay?" She nodded, then smiled, a real one, soft and quiet. "I kept thinking. All this time I felt like a puzzle with missing pieces, but now, it's like someone handed me the box with the picture on the front. I still have to put it together, but at least I know what it's supposed to look like." He didn't say anything, just reached back and squeezed her hand for a second before returning it to the wheel. Back at the house, things began to shift in ways he hadn't planned but somehow felt right. She started calling Evelyn every Sunday evening, their conversations stretching longer each week, sometimes just gossip about school, sometimes deep talks about Keisha, sometimes silence that didn't need filling. He'd hear her laugh from the hallway, a sound that used to be rare, now warm and easy. One afternoon he found her in the kitchen trying to make cornbread from Evelyn's handwritten recipe. Flour dusted her nose and the batter was lumpy, but she was focused. "Grandma says you have to stir it slow," she explained when he walked in. "Fast stirring makes it tough." He leaned against the counter, watching her. "You're getting good at this." "She says cooking is how Black families pass down love," she said, not looking up. "Not just recipes, stories, memories." He nodded. That night, they ate slightly burnt cornbread with butter and honey, and it tasted better than any five-star meal he'd ever had. But it wasn't just about food or phone calls. Something deeper was changing in her. She stood taller at school. When kids asked about her family tree project, she didn't shrink. She told them about Keisha, the student, the dreamer, the mom who named her before she was born. She even brought in Evelyn's notebook with permission to show her history class a poem Keisha wrote about hope. The teacher later told him it sparked the most thoughtful discussion they'd had all year. Still, he knew this wasn't just about the past. It was about belonging in the present too, so he started making changes, small ones but real. He found a local mentorship program led by Black women artists and signed her up. He switched her school counselor to someone trained in transracial adoption issues. And for the first time he attended a cultural festival in the city, not as a donor, but as a dad holding his daughter's hand while she tried jollof rice and listened to spoken word poetry under string lights. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching fireflies blink in the dusk, she turned to him. "You didn't have to do all this, you know." "Do what?" he asked. All of it. Finding Grandma. Letting me go to Detroit. Changing things here. She paused. Most people would have just said, be grateful for what you have. He looked at her. Really looked. Saw Keisha's eyes, Evelyn's strength, and something entirely her own. Grateful is important, he said. But knowing who you are? That's necessary, and I should have seen that sooner. She leaned her head on his shoulder. You see it now, and he did. A few weeks later, Evelyn came to visit. She arrived on a Thursday morning with a suitcase, a tin of peach cobbler, and a photo album twice as thick as the first. His daughter met her at the door and hugged her like she'd been waiting her whole life for this moment, which in a way she had. They spent the weekend talking, cooking, flipping through old photos. Evelyn showed her how to braid hair the way Keisha used to, tight cornrows with beads at the ends. He watched from the kitchen doorway as his daughter sat patiently on a stool, eyes closed while Evelyn's fingers worked gently through her hair, humming an old gospel tune. Later, over dinner, Evelyn turned to him. You've done right by her, she said simply. That matters more than you know. He shook his head. I missed a lot. But you showed up when it counted, she replied. That's what love looks like, not perfection. Just showing up. After she left, the house felt quieter again, but not empty. It felt connected, like roots had finally taken hold. Then came the school project. It was for history class. My family, past, present, and future. Last year, this would have sent his daughter into tears. But this time, she worked on it for days with quiet determination. She printed photos. Keisha in her scrubs, Evelyn on her porch, the two of them hugging in Detroit. She wrote about Wayne State, about Motown, about Sunday calls and cornbread lessons. She even included a short poem she'd written herself. I am not blank. I am Keisha's dream. Evelyn's prayer. My own voice, rising. She practiced her presentation in front of him, nervous but proud. What if they don't get it? She asked. They will, he said, because it's true. The night before the presentation, he found her in her room, staring at the family tree she'd made. Not the old worksheet with blanks, but a new one, drawn by hand on poster board. At the center was Keisha, branches spread out, one to Evelyn, one to him, one to herself. At the bottom, in bold letters, family is who loves you, who remembers you, and who helps you remember yourself. He didn't say anything, just kissed the top of her head and turned off the light. The next day, he sat in the back of the classroom, heart in his throat, as she stood at the front. She didn't stumble, didn't rush. She spoke clearly, with a calm strength that made more than one teacher wipe their eyes. When she finished, the room was silent for a beat, then burst into applause. Afterward, a boy who'd once laughed at her blank tree came up and said, "That was really cool. My grandma's from Nigeria. Maybe we can compare stories?" She smiled. Yeah, I'd like that. That evening, they celebrated with takeout and a movie. Halfway through, she turned to him. I don't feel lost anymore. He put his arm around her. You never were. You were just waiting to be found. And in that moment, he realized something. He'd spent his whole life building things, companies, empires, legacies. But this quiet, messy, beautiful act of helping his daughter find herself was the most important thing he'd ever built. Not with money. With love, with listening, with showing up even when it was hard. Later that night, as he passed her room, he heard music. Soft, soulful, familiar. He peeked in. She was dancing slowly by her window, eyes closed, humming along to a Motown song Evelyn had taught her. In her hand, she held the ultrasound photo with Amara written beneath it. He didn't interrupt. Just watched, heart full as she swayed. Not alone, not blank, but whole. And for the first time, he didn't just hear the music. He felt it. Months passed, and the house no longer felt like a showcase, it felt like a home. Real laughter echoed in the halls now, not just polite conversation. The kitchen smelled of spices from recipes Evelyn mailed every week, scribbled in her looping handwriting on index cards. There were photos everywhere, not just of vacations or achievements, but of moments, his daughter braiding her hair with Evelyn over video call, the two of them laughing over burnt pancakes, a quiet shot of her reading Keisha's poetry notebook by lamplight. He'd stopped checking his phone during dinner. Instead, he asked real questions. What made you smile today? Or what's something you're proud of? And she answered, not with one-word replies, but with stories, dreams, even worries. He listened. Really listened. Not to fix, just to be there. One Saturday morning, she came downstairs holding a thick envelope. "Grandma sent this," she said, eyes bright. Inside were old family photos. Keisha as a baby, Evelyn in her nursing uniform, cousins at barbecues, church picnics, Detroit street fairs. "She says we're invited to the Reynolds family reunion in August," she added, almost shyly. He didn't hesitate. "We'll go," she beamed. "Really?" "Of course. You're one of them." And she was, not just on paper, but in spirit. In the way she laughed like Keisha, stood like Evelyn, carried herself with a quiet confidence that hadn't been there before. School ended for the summer, and instead of expensive camps, she signed up for a local youth program focused on Black history and art. She came home one day with her hands stained with paint, talking excitedly about learning about the Harlem Renaissance and creating her own mural, inspired by her family's journey. He helped her hang it in her room, a tree with deep roots, faces woven into the bark, and at the top a girl reaching for the sun with her name, written in bold, golden letters, Amara. He stood back, taking it in. "It's beautiful. She's not gone," his daughter said softly, looking at the mural. "She's part of me, and now I get to carry her forward." He nodded, throat tight. That was the thing he'd finally understood. Healing wasn't about replacing the past. It was about weaving it into the present. Then came the night of the school's annual Family and Heritage Showcase. Last year, she'd skipped it. This year, she'd signed up weeks in advance. Her project wasn't just a poster. It was a small exhibit. Photos, Keisha's poems, Evelyn's recipes. A recording of her singing a Motown song her grandmother taught her. And a short video interview she'd done with Evelyn about what family means. He arrived early, helping her set up. Other families milled around. Some with elaborate displays, others with simple collages. He watched as his daughter greeted classmates, not with nervousness, but with ease. When a new student, recently adopted from Ethiopia, lingered near her booth looking unsure, she walked over and said, "Hey, I used to hate these projects too. Want to talk about it?" He saw the other girl's shoulders relax, saw the start of a friendship. When it was her turn to present, she stood in front of the small crowd, parents, teachers, students, and spoke without notes. She talked about feeling invisible, about the pain of not knowing where you come from, but then she smiled. "I learned that family isn't just blood. It's the people who choose you, who fight for you, who help you find your voice. My mom gave me life. My grandma kept her memory alive. And my dad." He listened when I screamed. That's love. Afterward, more than one parent came up to him with tears in their eyes. "Thank you for letting her share that," one woman said. "My son feels the same way." He just nodded. The real thanks belonged to his daughter, for her courage, her honesty, her heart. Later that night as they drove home, she was quiet, tired, but happy. At a red light, she turned to him. "Remember that day you came home and heard me screaming?" He did. Vividly. "I wasn't just crying about a school project," she said. "I was scared I'd never belong anywhere. Like I was just passing through. And now?" he asked gently. "Now I know I belong in more places than I thought," she said. "With Grandma, with Keisha's memory, with you, even with kids at school who are figuring it out too. Belonging isn't one place. It's all the people who see you and love you anyway." He reached over and squeezed her hand. No words needed. Back at the house, she didn't go straight to bed. Instead, she went to the piano in the living room, the one he'd bought years ago that mostly gathered dust. She sat down and began to play. Not a classical piece, but a simple, soulful tune Evelyn had hummed during their last call. Her fingers were clumsy at first, but she kept going, soft and steady. He sat on the couch watching her. The moonlight through the windows caught the gold in her earrings, ones Evelyn had sent for her birthday. On the wall behind her, her mural glowed faintly in the dim light. In that moment, everything made sense. All the late nights, the missed meetings, the uncomfortable truths, he'd traded his old idea of success for something far richer. Not control, not perfection, just connection. The song ended. She turned to him, smiling. "Grandma says music is how we talk to the ancestors, that they listen when we sing their songs." "Then I hope she's listening," he said. "I think she is," his daughter replied. "And I think she's proud." He walked over and hugged her, long and tight. She hugged back the way she hadn't when she was younger, like she was finally sure she was safe. Later, as he lay in bed, he thought about the journey. It hadn't been neat. There were still hard days, questions with no answers, grief that surfaced unexpectedly, moments when the world outside reminded her she was different. But now she had tools. She had stories. She had people who loved her in all the ways that mattered, and he had learned the most important lesson of his life. Love isn't just giving someone a better life. It's helping them understand the life they already came from and honoring it. The next morning, he woke to the smell of coffee and cornbread. She was in the kitchen, humming that same Motown tune, flipping pancakes with one hand while talking to Evelyn on speakerphone about a recipe for peach cobbler. He leaned in the doorway, watching them, 2 generations connected by loss, healed by presence. She looked up and grinned. "Morning. Pancakes?" He walked in, poured himself a cup of coffee, and sat at the table like he belonged there. Not as a billionaire, not as a hero, but simply as a father who finally got it right. And for the first time in a long time, the house didn't just feel full, it felt whole.